You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Parker Ranger, the Locked On Coogs. You're talking Houston's big 92-86 double overtime victory over the Kansas Jayhawks in the feared Fog Allen Stadium. And I mentioned the first segment that this game, painfully obvious in the second watch on Sunday, became a big time culture war down the stretch. I should point out that for Houston, that meant there was no quit, never die mentality, nothing of the sort. Houston was going to fight until after the final whistle to claw and scratch and strive for every single point they could. And they're going to make sure they deflected and prevented and did as much as they could to keep Kansas from scoring. Again, 86 points. We got to play that. Matt, got to remind yourself they played 50 minutes of basketball in this one. Kansas, on the other hand, I would point out, did kind of quit. I mentioned Houston was down 6 with 17 seconds in the first overtime and found a way to get it to the second. Kansas was down 5 with a minute 40 left in the second overtime. They were down 6 with 40 seconds left in that overtime. And visibly, their body language was shut down. They were done. They were at home. They wanted to go back to their dorm rooms. They looked ready to quit. Meanwhile, up by 5 points with about 2 minutes left, Emanuel Sharp, who played this game on a bum ankle, is sliding across the floor, poking the ball out of guys' hands, forcing steals. He slid across the floor on his butt to make it that steal. Can we talk about how crazy that is? He's gathering his footing. He's got a bad ankle. He slides across the floor on his backside and bats the ball down to force a steal in key moment situation where he's up 5 with 2 minutes to go. Up 5. Like, just tremendous culture moment out of him as well. You can't say enough about guys like Malik and stuff too, just taking advantage of every single moment while they're out there. Kansas came into this game as a number one team in America, or came into the season, I should say, as the number one team in America. And now at 5-3, I don't know if they can really show up and win the Big 12. They were the number one team for the first month of the season. I mentioned the first segment they beat Carolina, Michigan State, Duke. It looks like Houston might have broken them. On those same national kind of conversation, I was saying Houston's at the top of the comments down below, or talking to Derek, who works up there with Logged On Jayhawks. He's a great guy. I don't mean to say he had anything to do with this, but his comment sections, his replies to tweets and stuff like that, they're questioning starting lineups and rotations and shot distributions. They're all kind of at this limbo where they don't know what's happening. And it's the end of January up there. And Houston has very much done that to them. This program, had they snuck out with that win, had Emanuel Sharp 3 not go on in, or Malik Wilson's 3 not gone in, and Kansas escapes with the win, are they feeling those same things? That they had the same glaring holes for any point of the game, and Houston broke them to where they had to look in the mirror and see it all. It was just a crazy outcome. And I want to stress, Houston didn't have to not quit this game. No, they did because of who their coach is and the program, the culture they've instilled in there for over 10 years at this point. But a loss in overtime at Fog Allen in late January for your first Big 12 loss would not have been a bad loss. You wouldn't have fallen far in the standings. You'd probably still end up tied for the number one place, seed right now in the Big 12 conference on Monday. You'd probably still in the top 10 of the AP poll come Monday. You clearly weren't on your A game. You missed free throws at an alarming rate. Emmanuel and LJ Cryer shot the ball really poorly throughout the end of the first overtime. Emmanuel's first points are that 3 with less than 17 seconds left in the game. And Emmanuel did hit some key clutch ones later, but you could have just chalked this one up as, hey, they were better that night. We played 10 times. We probably beat them 9 of them, but that was a bad night for us. Or, tough place to play. Let's play on a neutral floor at home. We got them by 30, whatever, right? And it certainly would have been a lot better loss than you had to them a year ago, which I'll remind you is the last regular season Big 12 loss for this Houston program. But they didn't do any of that. They didn't make any of those excuses. They didn't feel sorry for themselves in any of those ways. That wasn't what this program was. Meanwhile, Kansas was upset they had to play a second overtime. They were sulking. They were shoulders down, faces at the ground, just shaking heads. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe it was happening. And, you know, I want to say that, and I'm not a big in the pro sports about built and bought and whatever, and I'm sure it's going to come to college with the way the house settlements look like it's going to head and things shifting and whatever. But Kansas is a team that is, relatively speaking, a very well purchased team. They, in the 2024 transfer portal rankings, had the number 2 team on three. They got 6 transfers in. The year before, they got Hunter Dickinson as the top guy in the transfer portal. They're the only team in the top 10 of the transfer portal rankings of 2024 that did not have a major coaching change as of recent years. For reference, Houston, who lost Damian Dunn and pulled in Miles Uzan in the summer of 24, they were 53rd. Kansas spends an estimated, again, on 3 numbers here, but $5 million in NIL on that basketball program by the same metrics, so same estimations and stuff like that. They got Houston at less than 1. Now, I don't think that's completely accurate. I know Landon Gosling's done some pretty cool stuff. Lincoln Coogs has some stuff set up that I just don't think that's quite accurate. It's just what they've got on the books, what they've got out there. But regardless, those metrics are the same for both schools, and it's more than 5 times as much money being spent on the Kansas roster, and they don't look like they enjoy playing basketball or playing together in the same way that Houston and the Cougs do. Look, I'm not saying that Houston hasn't benefited from the transfer portal. Miles Uzan was a vital part of winning, played probably his best offensive game as a Cougar on Saturday night. LJ Cryer came in from Baylor the year before. You go back and find, I guess, in a pre-NIL era, you can find Kyler Edwards or Quentin Grimes or whatever. Like, Houston's benefited from the transfer world, right? But they've built a culture that those guys jump into. And it looks like, to me, Kansas just kind of went out, kind of like Kansas State did, and just bought a bunch of good players and hoped it worked. And that's not working. And this idea of culture building and program building and, you know, and all of that in the NIL world is like kind of topsy-turvy for some of these good coaches. I think Bill Self's a good coach, right? But now that everyone's kind of got a level playing field, being able to buy players, to pay for players, etc., you're seeing who can build a program with more than just dollars. And I don't know, you can look at these 2 programs and think that the culture isn't a gigantic difference. They've got all the recruit stars. They've got the more recent national championship. Uh, they've got guys all over the NBA, although I'd point out that there's been a lot from Houston recently. But the culture is the difference. And Houston entered over each overtime period ready to roll. Kansas wanted to fold it up. It was visibly obvious. They wanted to fold it up and go home, and they were broken. And the fans are, like I said, ready to fold up the season and talk about what's going wrong here and what went wrong there and da 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 da. Building a culture, buying a culture. There's a significant difference between those two. I'm not saying that the only thing the difference in the game was the culture. I did say I talked some about X's and O's. I said that after the game on Saturday. I wanted to watch it on Sunday to get that because I was just too excited to think about that on Saturday night. So I wanted to break that down a little bit in the third and final segment. But we did tell you all that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, the Eagles and the Chiefs, both Big 12 quarterbacks, what it's worth. Endless possibilities over at FanDuel. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. And whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, there's kind of fun stuff to do over at FanDuel to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. You can download the app right now and head over to fanduel.com to get started. Just bet $5 and you win $200 back in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com, $5 down, $200 back in bonus bets. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59.